You are listening to the Football Diehards podcast with your hosts, Justin Lonero and Bob Harris, sponsored by DraftKings. Sign up now using promo code DIEHARDS, DIEHARDS. Make a first-time $5 deposit, and you'll receive a free $3 ticket.
Hello and welcome to the Football Diehards podcast. I'm your host, Justin Lonero, along with my co-hosts, Mr. Kyle Dvorchak and Mr. Bob Harris. Gentlemen, it is week 5. Wow, just flies, doesn't it? Mr. Harris, what is going on in Albuquerque, New Mexico this evening?
All kinds of great things. Tons of preparation in advance of week 5. All kinds of content already going up on the footballdiehards.com website, including a fine article by one Kyle Dvorchak that kind of sets the pace for the week. So be sure to check out his week 4 injury review, week 5 free agent preview article all in one piece. It's like very handy. Evan Tarciano's free agent waiver wire wizard is waiting for you there as well. And there'll be more stuff in coming days, including Justin's digging into crates, DFS, looking for the bargains. Justin is my own DFS 3 and out, the tournament piece, and Kyle's great tournament and cash game breakdowns. There'll be live videos with Kyle and Bobby Gomes. There'll be audio and video from me. There'll be this podcast, which is amazing and fantastic. So many things going on at the footballdiehards.com website, except the wheels of industry ground to a halt. Monday night, a halt, because one Kyle Dvorchak had to go to see a group called the Black Keys. I was told they weren't terrible. I went out and investigated. I got a show review from young Kyle. He thought they were phenomenal. I went and gave a listen to this group, and I found them to be much like the White Stripes, 2 people playing drums and guitar, except the Black Keys, one is not Jack White and the other is not his sister. It's amazing.
I'd say that about sums it up. I kind of grew up on them. They're from probably like within 10 minutes of where I live right now. They got popular right at the time that I grew into listening to music and thinking about things critically. So kind of moved on from, I don't know, whatever I was listening to as a child to real music. And I have loved them ever since. It was just unreal. Super excited. I'm surprised they didn't cancel the Monday night game because I wasn't able to cover the news. But thank you again, Bob, for covering me. And let's hop into another week of DFS. Last week the cash game lineups hit pretty easily. If you were on the Wayne Gallmans, Austin Eckler's, and Christian McCaffrey's, pretty much cashed after doing that alone. So let's see if we can hit something like that again.
Yeah, let's jump into the news real quick. There will be no Cam Newton again this week. Kyle Allen starts again. Still no Drew Brees. This kid, Melvin Gordon, is coming back. I hope not everyone, bought into they're going to use him kind of thing. It seemed silly and ridiculous on 2 days of practice that he would get extensive play, especially in a game that the Chargers were looking to win, although they were very shorthanded. They will be again this week, but Melvin Gordon will not be among those watching from the sidelines. He'll play against the Denver defense that gave up 225 yards to Leonard Fournette last week, and then lost Bradley Chubb. We also have some injuries at wide receiver. Devontae Adams is a big one we'll be watching. T.Y. Hilton once again a little beat up. So there'll be a few others. John Ross today we learned will miss multiple games. Auden Tate climbs up the depth chart a little bit without A.J. Green ready to return. So there'll be plenty going on, plenty to watch throughout the week at the site. So let's dive in, though, to the DFS plays. Justin, at quarterback, how's the Kyle Allen train rolling right now?
It's rolling, but I don't know that I'm going to have him week 5 by any stretch. We've talked about him. He looks like a pro. I don't know that they miss Cam Newton by any stretch. For me this week, it's pretty clear cut. At this point in time, of course, it's Tuesday night, and I'm going to be heavily involved with some Deshaun Watson in a lot of that Falcons-Houston Texans game. I actually feel safer, ironically, with Matt Ryan at a discount on the road than I do with Watson at home. I think Watson has the higher ceiling, but pay up. Watson is projecting well, and, of course, Tom Brady in a huge smash spot at Washington. It just feels like a joke. Buffalo gave him a run for their money, but they're going to absolutely destroy the Redskins. Bill Belichick is not too happy. You could tell me there's some flaws with this Patriots team in spite of their greatness. If I'm going to pay down, I am. Kirk Cousins is popping in models, which is because of his price. This team is a run-oriented team. We love Dalvin Cook. Adam Thielen came out and said, look, if we're going to win games, we're going to throw the football. There's an opportunity here against this leaky Giants secondary for him. I like his price. We obviously like the talent around him. I'm not going to be heavily invested in Kirk Cousins, but if I was to pay way down, it's going to be Cousins, and then a shade above Kirk Cousins will be Carson Wentz at home against the New York Jets. Wentz is one of these. He feels safe every time he takes the field. He's healthy. I don't care whether he's home, whether he's away. This is a matchup at home. Alshon Jeffrey's healthy. He has Zach Ertz. Deshaun Jackson is not going to be playing, right? But we saw a semblance of a ground game with Jordan Howard last week. We know how highly they think of Miles Sanders. So this is an Eagles team that's going to go to the playoffs. They'll probably go deep into the playoffs as far as I can see. And that's where I'm at. I'll throw one more at you, and that would be Jameis Winston in a divisional shootout at New Orleans. Of course, Jameis can disappoint us, but it looked like Arena League football in L.A. last week. Can he continue that? Potentially on a fast track. The Saints defense is pretty good, but in tournaments, I will have some Jameis Winston.
Still some concerns for me with Deshaun Watson's pass protection, which some weeks does not show up, according to last week in particular, and previous weeks, right? Week 3, it was pretty good, and then last week it went to hell. Kyle, how do you feel about, in particular, Jameis Winston, who it feels like when I'm playing him, I'm waiting for him to turn back into a pumpkin, right. And when I'm not playing him, he's determined to turn into the glass slipper or whatever. What do we do with him?
Yeah, I'm not as confident in playing Jameis as I am that he will be highly owned, and especially his weapons. I expect Chris Godwin's his ownership is literally going to be just this giant zigzagging train back and forth like a roller coaster of he goes down 2 weeks, people don't play him, and then he busts off a 160-yard game, then he goes up to chalk, and then he busts again because he's not dominating the work there, but he is a more efficient receiver, so his volume not quite there, but when he gets volume, he's ungodly efficient. I mean, he's God and win. I'm not sure how you don't. It's free money making that joke. But so I don't know. I'm not awfully interested in him, chasing the points from last week. There's some guys in my cash games especially that I'll be all over. Matt Ryan, a friend of the show, I guess, friend of mine, John Kelly, pointed out that they're sort of operating this offense as if they're last year's Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They've just abandoned the run game, and you can't blame them given how injured their running backs have been, given how good Matt Ryan has been the past 2 years for the Falcons. They've got one of the best receiving corps, so I'll be all over Matt Ryan. I expect him to be throwing upwards of 40 times a game. Plus they're at Houston, so of course you want your Matt Ryans to be at home in the dome, but I still like this. I like this matchup specifically. I'm not really afraid of Houston's secondary, and more importantly, the total of this game I want to say is 48 right now. So, and I think that could even rise throughout the week. So for me, this is kind of, you're getting a ton of volume in a good game, and I think his receivers are very reasonably priced, specifically Ridley, who we can talk about later. But just in general, he's an easy quarterback to stack. He doesn't cost a ton, and he is, if it weren't for maybe Kyler Murray and a few other quarterbacks, last year, he might have led the league in passing attempts. The pace he's at right now, but we're starting to move towards a more pass-heavy league in general. I just love everything about this game for him and stacking it.
Kyle, Justin mentioned the Deshaun Watson and the pass rush, that can be so disruptive. I noticed today Dan Quinn was basically, calling Deshaun Watson the best man who ever played the game. And I suspect that's because he's setting expectations for another whooping for his Atlanta Falcons. Are you buying this matchup?
I mean, the Falcons' defense is pretty much free. They're a banged-up defense as always somehow. And even when they're healthy, they're not honestly that good. But for me, he's not getting a ton of volume. He, his pass attempts the last few weeks, 33, 34, 29, 30, they're not relying on him so heavily. His rushing attempts are good, but they're not Lamar Jackson good where they outweigh, if he was a low-volume passer. I think he's a fine tournament play. Watson is always in playing tournaments, and I think, like I said, this game is really easy to stack given that a lot of the players are priced down after disappointing week 4s. But for me, I don't know. Yeah. Maybe I'll have some exposure to him, but I think Matt Ryan might just be the dollar for dollar better play, and he's a lot cheaper too. So.
Yeah, that's true. They're good up front. That's a good defensive line from the Atlanta Falcons. Like Bob said, I mean, Deshaun Watson was sacked 65 times last year. I mean, he can hit the deck, and this is not a terrible Atlanta Falcons defense by any stretch, especially up front.
I don't disagree with any of that. Okay, running backs. Kyle, get the ball rolling there. Who are we liking this week?
I mean, like, if you're not playing Christian McCaffrey, you can just Venmo me. I think it's like Kyle-DVO or something. I don't remember. If you look up my name, I'm sure it'll come up. Like, I'll take your money and I'll probably invest it better. You're just giving away money if you're not playing Christian McCaffrey. Nobody's being used. Like, nobody, maybe, like, by the end of the season, there's actually a very good chance nobody has ever been used in the NFL, in the history of the NFL, like he has for. Last week, 27 rush attempts. The week before that, 24, 16 and 19 the previous 2 weeks. Plus, I mean, 10 targets, 4 targets, 6 targets, 11 targets. Like, there's a good chance he goes at this point for 1,000, and he's getting a lot of their touchdown equity with Cam Newton out, not being their, like, dominant goal line back, which he was when he was healthy. So, like, I'm totally playing him. I think paying up for Zeke isn't a bad play. Green Bay starting to look like a funnel defense for running backs. Dalvin Cook, I expect him to shred the Giants, but for me, it's Christian McCaffrey, and then mix in your cheap guys. If James Conner, he looks fine, but maybe so that relegates Jalen Samuel to tournaments. But Jalen Samuel did start getting run last week. James Conner nicked up. I think that's an interesting play. And then on top of that, I'm gonna love me some Austin Eckler in tournaments. I really hope Melvin Gordon starts getting hyped up, because I think it'll be, at best, we'll see him used like we saw Zeke's first game back, where the second back really gets a lot of work in. And even beyond that, if they take a lead, which they're expected to, we could see a lot of Eckler when, if it's a big lead, and I'm not a big fan of the Broncos, they don't look very good. In fact, they look pretty darn bad. If they have a big lead, it could just be more Eckler. I love that we're getting a discount on him now. It's just everything is there for Eckler for me. And of course, like we saw, he is more than capable of just being a dominant bell cow back. So in tournaments, I think the Melvin Gordon thing is actually a really good news for Eckler in tournaments, at least.
Right. And so just on Samuel, this whole Wildcat thing, does this add greatly to the appeal for you, or is it just kind of a meh?
Yeah, it's just meh. It's good. It's certainly not a bad thing, but I don't know how much, like, if it happened consistently where we saw him running a lot of Wildcat in every single game for the next 2 or 3 games, sure, you start factoring that in, but it's just a 1-game sample right now. Could it be a factor later in the season, like, as we get more and more information? Yeah, but, like, it would be, like, borderline unprecedented to see a team run a lot of Wildcat with their backup running back. So, I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to put too much stock into that. One more
Somewhere
thing.
Ronnie Brown is saying, no way, mister.
That's right.
Josh Cribbs is like, running backs, they wouldn't do that, but Josh Cribbs, yeah. So, one more running back before we move on to Justin's running backs. David Montgomery, I wasn't super high on him coming into the season, and they weren't using him. Like, I felt super right for about a week. And then the past 3 weeks, 21 carries, 13 carries, 18 carries, then 5 targets, 3 targets, and 3 targets. Like, that is insane volume. He is very liable to be this week's Nick Chubb, this week's Leonard Fournette, where, like, you just chase volume. And especially when you're chasing volume at lower ownership, like, I don't expect him to score 3 touchdowns, but do I expect him to get, like, 20-plus touches? Yeah, like, the past 3 weeks would say that's pretty much what we can expect from him. So I love the low ownership, given that he hasn't really done much this season, compared that with the great volume. And also, they're probably not going to want to throw, because why would you if you have Chase Daniel?
Yeah, there you have it. Justin, you're whack at the running backs.
Yeah, weird things happen in London, Kyle, but Dave Montgomery is popping in models at his cost, and I would tend to agree with the volume. We thought it was going to be cloudier than it's becoming right now. I mean, Tariq Cohen has his role, but Dave Montgomery taken over for Jordan Howard, so I think he's just about a lock for 20 touches a game at this point in time. And Leonard Fournette, I think when Leonard Fournette is healthy, it would behoove us to play him, right? I mean, this is a guy that can withstand volume.
Workload. Yeah,
over 30 touches last week. No touchdowns, but he's never healthy, so you got to ride that train. Bob, we were talking about Leonard Fournette all offseason, getting him at a discount in best balls and season-long leagues. So get while the getting's good.
And I'll let you keep going. I just wanted to interject. Well, 2 things. As the only one who among us, I believe, who's been to London, weird things do happen, but only if you know the right places. And on Fournette, I thought it was interesting. Easy, kids. I thought it was interesting that he was like the voice of reason on the late in the game when Cam Robinson was going berserker on everybody.
Yeah, that was
There's
odd.
Leonard Fournette in there regulating. A year ago, Leonard Fournette would have been in there instigating. This year, he's regulating. I think that's a really good sign for where he's at just in general, his progression and maturity. So that's a great sign, and also the workload a great sign. But please continue, Justin.
I thought he was yelling. I'm like, why is he yelling at his teammate right now? They just won the football game, but then you broke down.
They could have lost it. 15 yards the other way, it might have made a little challenge there for Mr. Josh Lamb.
He's reformed, and this is the identity of the Jacksonville Jaguars offense. He is it. He's it. They do have somewhat of a wide receiver cast there that we just don't know what we're going to get out of each week, but he is the focal point of that offense. I agree with Christian. The Christian McCaffrey sentiment is he's sub 9K. You got to ride him in cash games for certain. It's a week where we're obligated to pay up for one of these running backs, and whether it's going to be Alvin Kamara in a potential shootout against the Bucks. I would dollar for dollar, it's Christian McCaffrey. A friend of mine said today that you're an absolute moron if you don't play Dalvin Cook. How much can Dalvin Cook, carry this offense on his back? I mean, I know he's got a good matchup, but if this was ever a moment for the Minnesota Vikings to throw the football, it would be against the Giants. Lot of heat with Adam Thielen talking. You have the weaponry there. Stephon Diggs. Kyle, this is his breakout year, right? I mean, Adam Thielen's Adam Thielen. These guys want to get the football. They want to win games, and it's certainly not going to happen just with Dalvin Cook. And the defense hasn't played as great as they have in recent years. I would agree with Kyle as far as Austin Eckler. He's projected high this week. I think people are going to forget about him immediately, given that Melvin Gordon is back. And the reality is Melvin Gordon is going to take a couple weeks to get back into NFL mode, if you will. And the fact of the matter is Austin Eckler is the modern-day Danny Woodhead for the Chargers, a trusted piece of the Chargers offense for Phillip Rivers. So you can just rest assured he's going to have 6 or 7 receptions. I do like David Johnson at 7,500. We saw last night
last week.
Well, no, as far as what the Steelers did against the Bengals. David Johnson is showing shades of David Johnson, but we're talking about Jalen Samuels. We're talking about what James Conner do. I mean, you're going to run the football against the Cincinnati Bengals. They are absolutely atrocious. I think Jalen Samuels, the Pittsburgh Steelers like him. And I think that we saw what he was capable of doing last night. If James Conner's unable to go, I guess he might practice tomorrow. He could jump into the James Conner role, and he's, 4,100 week 5. So he's a plug-and-play for me. I have one more guy I'll throw at you. And I do like David Montgomery, Kyle. And James White is projecting well this week. I'm not going to get off Wayne Gallman at all. 5,400. He slid into that running back role pretty easily. Replacing Saquon Barkley. 5,400, I think he's a guy that can get 20-plus touches, 5-6 receptions, and pay off that $5,400 salary. So I'm going to have some Wayne Gallman for certain. And I do like Aaron Jones against the Dallas Cowboys. It'll be interesting to see if Jamal Williams plays. I guess he was in the building, but he almost died on the field the other day. Aaron Jones, Matt LaFleur, give Aaron Jones the football. If they're out Devontae Adams, this offense should pretty much run through Aaron Jones against the Dallas Cowboys. I like the volume there, too.
As you mentioned, the Cincinnati Bengals giving up the second most fantasy points to running backs so far this season, only behind the Miami Dolphins. By the way, Green Bay is third worst, so Ezekiel Elliott fans enjoy that. Putting on my junior G-Man hat. Justin, you only have 2 friends. I didn't call you a moron today. No. It's been at least a week since I did. So, Kyle, why are you calling Justin a moron? No.
Did you call me a moron?
Well, you only have 2 friends, and he's the other one.
I wouldn't put me in that group. Justin has a mystery friend out here. I would say acquaintance at best, associate.
I have a few.
No, we're already back. We're already dialing back on our friendship with Justin. Good call by you, Kyle. Showing great maturity once again. So let's go ahead and dive into wide receivers. Justin, you start this time. Let's start at the low end. Give me some cheap options.
Ooh, do I have to? I
Please.
tend to pay up for wide receivers, but you mentioned John Ross is out, so you're getting pretty much a free square with Odin Tate. You're leaving 8 targets on the field with John Ross being out. Your boy John Ross, by the way. I feel like you've been talking about him for years. He can't teach speed. He's got that 4.2 40 speed gone.
You also can't teach bone density, apparently.
That's true. That's very true.
Or muscle.
Very true.
Pliability, probably more likely.
Free square there, and we're trying to figure out what the hell's going on with Dontrell Inman. At 3,400, we like him in cash games, but I, to no avail, have found he was hurt last week. He paid off his salary. Cannot find any update.
Doesn't sound that worrisome, his situation at this point. But, Mike Williams is the one that we're watching, that back issue that,
True.
Anytime you're talking about his back, we think back to his rookie season when he was basically sidelined the entire time by the back. But carry on.
Yep. And I'm just looking at, I am taking some interest in the Denver Broncos wide receivers at this point in time, whether it be Courtland Sutton or Emmanuel Sanders. I think as an older guy, Emmanuel Sanders has a soft spot in my heart, but Courtland Sutton is coming to his own, and I think we all thought that he was going to. So whether it's Sanders at 5,100, Courtland Sutton, I'll probably have a mixture of both, but Sutton feels like safer today. And it'll probably be Sanders tomorrow. I think Sanders has the higher ceiling. So I want a piece of that game there.
Just quickly, Justin, are you worried with that offense that it's, performing or underperforming to the degree that maybe only one of those guys can be worthwhile any given week, and divining that is going to be part of the deal?
Yeah, and that brings you to be playing eeny, meeny, miny, mo each week. But if they're trailing, I think there's enough permitting their price. I mean, this is contingent on their prices, of course. But I mean, if I'm looking at Emmanuel Sanders or Courtland Sutton right around 5K, you're going to have to make a decision. In 8 out of 10 times, it's going to be Emmanuel Sanders, in that we know what he is as NFL wide receiver at this point in time. Sutton's coming to his own, and he certainly has the ingredients of a flourishing, I would say, a top 25, top 30 NFL wide receiver, but it's going to be Sanders. There's room for some concern. I mean, the ground game is ambiguous. I haven't said that word in a while, guys. It's one of my favorites in terms of Philip Lindsay and Royce Freeman. I mean, industry colleague Brad Evans thought this was going to be Royce Freeman's year. It's a mess in a difficult AFC West, and it's a dumpster fire. I mean, let's be honest, and it's not as Broncos. We're used to seeing the Broncos be better than this. I mean, this is a bad Broncos team, especially with Chubb out now. In terms of the high end, we're getting a discount on Michael Thomas. I mean, Michael Thomas is 6,600 this week, gentlemen. At home against a pretty good Bucs defense, but I'm going to take that and pounce on that every single time based on the fact that, well, he's a top 5 NFL wide receiver, and he has a quarterback in Teddy H2O that's going to pepper him with targets. So I'm going to jump on Michael Thomas all day long. Kyle mentioned, and I would agree, that this Houston Texans, Atlanta Falcons game is going to be one to stack. Neither of these teams have a running game, so it kind of helps us out in the regard where they're not going to go near their backfields. So whether it be Calvin Ridley, Mohamed Sanu, or Austin Hooper, I'm not going to have any Hooper. This Texans team held Greg Olsen to next to nothing week 4, but give me some Ridley. I think Will Fuller's finally going to have a touchdown. It's only going to take him 5 weeks, but I'm going to keep on him until he does. Like I said, Sanu, Ridley, DeAndre Hopkins, and that's going to be a fantastic game to stack for me. Larry Fitzgerald is popping in models currently, gentlemen. 6K, I don't love it, but I certainly get the logic, and I will have a little bit of Adam Thielen based on the fact that, again, you saw his little small presser outside his locker room or wherever the hell it was, and he made it pretty clear, and he was efficient as he said it. Look, we're going to win football games. We got to throw the ball. So Adam Thielen, 6,700. Give me some Adam Thielen in cash games or tournaments.
And Kirk Cousins apologized to him on Tuesday.
See, there you go.
For his poor performance, and I don't know if that and a dime will buy somebody a cup of coffee. Kyle, your wide receivers of choice this week, sir.
I gotta say, you actually took the cake this week for old man sayings, despite Justin being the
right.
We just crossed the 50 episode mark. It went underreported.
And I am the old man.
Wow.
Yeah, it went underreported.
Like,
we crossed the 50 episode mark a while ago, and Justin has that record, 50 in a row, and you finally beat him.
I feel challenged, but and Justin does like, being an old fella. It's like, child, please, what are you talking about?
I know.
All right, let's hop into my receivers. I am so excited to keep punting off money on Will Fuller. Like, he has to hit sometime, or if not,
right?
If not, my
he's
dad's
like that
basement
slot
is,
you can't walk away from, right?
My dad's basement is
Pulling
waiting
the
for me. It is just beckoning to me after I punt off all my money. But he is, let me see, 1, 2, 3. He's about top 10, top 12 in air yards. But like the guys around him have scored, let's see, like 55, 80, 66 points. Like, that is a reasonable expectation on the season for Will Fuller to have, like, given that he is just below 400 air yards on 23 targets, but they're so high variance because he's averaging a 17 ADOT that, yeah, he hasn't connected. And maybe, I would say the splits of him and Deshaun Watson were certainly a small sample and overblown before. This is closer to expectation, but I think it's gone the wrong way of variance. I expect him to bounce back. Or, I'll give away all my money trying. Another player in the exact same boat is Marquise Brown, third in the league in air yards at 507. But only has 60 fantasy points, which is basically, like, I would imagine close to half of that came from week 1. So since then, he has continued to rack up the air yards, but not the fantasy points. Like, these things just tend to regress. And of course, I love being able to stack him with Lamar Jackson. I want to say Marquise Brown this week's 5,400 maybe. His price has gotten so cheap for the upside he has. And paying down for him lets you stack him with Lamar Jackson, who I believe is the highest priced quarterback on the slate. But anytime, especially obviously on DraftKings, when you have a quarterback who can throw for 300 and rush for 100, putting you into the double bonus, which, like, don't know. I don't think that's probably ever happened. I'm excited to use the phrase double bonus after I win a giant tournament for Lamar Jackson. So I like being able to stack him, and I like being able to stack Will Fuller with the rest of this game. And then I still think you're playing Keenan Allen in your cash game lineups. He is still, of the high price, we'll say over 7,000 receivers, the best expected points per dollar spent of your salary cap, over 7,000, and it's not particularly close for me in terms of, like, this model I have that projects fantasy points based on line of scrimmage and the target. So obviously it helps account for basically, like, you want your team to be targeting you in the end zone. So he is still, like, clearly the number one receiver in terms of that. So I like playing him at just 7,300. And in tournaments, I'm going to run Brandon Cooks as opposed to Cooper Kupp or Robert Woods. The amount of ownership we're going to see, like, stacked up on Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp after both those dudes popped off will not be paying any respect to Brandon Cooks. And I think, given that I think he's second on the team in air yards, you just leverage the ownership and play Brandon Cooks. Like, anytime one of these dudes pops off, just play the one that didn't the following week, and, like, I'm sure you will hit on a good tournament at least once.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. In fact, I've been trying that. I just am in the wrong part of the rotation like the rest of my life. I'm missing by 1 week, everybody. Actually, it's hard to miss on Kupp if you play him because he's been solid every week. But beyond that, it's been a little bit of a crapshoot. That whole offense, a little bit of a crapshoot. Kyle, tight ends, please.
Yeah, for tight ends, it's actually, like, I feel like we've had good value every single week, and this is finally one where the prices have corrected. I still think Darren Waller, being one of the league's leaders in targets on a team that expects to be down a lot, I'm not awfully afraid of the Chicago defense, just given that, like, volume trumps everything. Sure, they're a better defense than most. When you're getting the volume that Darren Waller gets, I don't really care. So I'm just going to play Darren Waller until it doesn't work, because it has worked pretty much every time. And he's yet to score a touchdown. Like, we actually haven't seen the true Darren Waller upside game, despite him having 7 catches, 13 catches, 6 and 7 catches. Like, he has a tremendous floor regardless of who he plays. Like, Minnesota Vikings was his best game. Like, if you need any indication that defense isn't awfully predictive of your offensive players' performances, it's playing Minnesota Vikings and then going 134 yards on them, because, yeah, like, you can do that when your team gets crushed if you're Darren Waller. So I think he is the best pay up at the position. And if I'm paying down, I don't mind doubling down on, I guess this is Showdown, but if you're playing Showdown, don't mind doubling down on Will Dissly. Paying down more, Tyler Eifert, I mean, the blueprint is you play tight ends against Arizona.
Right?
It's worked every week.
I've been waiting for
Eifert,
this.
Price down to 3,300. I know you're going to be excited about this. I don't buy 100% that just every tight end that goes against Arizona is going to smash, but at 3,300, I don't mind doing that all super cheap. And he saw 5 targets on Monday night. That's tied his season high. Actually, he's had 5 targets in every game except for one. So you're getting the volume. You're getting it against the tight end funnel if there ever was one. And also, being without John Ross, I just expect him to be on the field more. I expect him to run more 1 and 2 tight end sets. So I just think it's all going to be there for Eifert on top of the juicy matchup.
Right. The funny thing is, and I think it was Al Zeidenfeld wrote last week on ESPN, basically how do you pick your tight end? Step 1, is Arizona playing? Step 2, does the team they're playing have a tight end? Step 3, put that tight end in your lineup. It's been going on forever. The Cardinals also, by the way, released their starting safety DJ Swearinger this week. And why? Because they can't cover tight ends. They've been a lot of talk in the Arizona media about all this. So interesting. I wanted to see if you would have him on your list. Justin, is he on yours?
No, but he's on yours, and it makes me happy to hear Tyler Eifert has a juicy matchup. I will serenade you if Tyler Eifert does anything against the Arizona Cardinals.
I have to root against him.
Yeah, call me cynical. He just want, again, this is picture perfect. Obviously, against the Arizona Cardinals, we were all over Disley, but I don't see it with Tyler Eifert. It was a couple of years removed, and although he did have some targets last night, so I can see the optimism. But I suppose if there was any time for him to shine, it would be against the Arizona Cardinals. It might be a week to pay up for Zach Ertz. I do like me some Carson Wentz. I think the most comfortable item of that Eagles offense is Zach Ertz. You don't have Travis Kelce on the slate. 6K is manageable. It's almost like a mid-range wide receiver one. I think Ertz can pick up 10 targets. Zach Ertz puts up wide receiver one numbers when he wants to. I can't envision myself paying for Darren Waller. By the way, Bob, how did that interview go?
He's a great guy, very humble. If you've talked a lot about some interesting family history, his great-grandfather, Fats Waller, one of the jazz piano innovators back in Harlem, early in the last century. So he's big in the music now that he's looked that up, but definitely a humble guy and a very enjoyable interview. So, and tomorrow, Wednesday on Football Diehards on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio is Ronald Jones of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Wow!
If you don't hear it live, you can catch it on demand.
Dude, Justin, why don't I get that kind of wow? I'll probably be on, depending on when Jones. I was on right after Waller last week. You're like, oh, that's so cool, Darren Waller.
I talk to you all the time through text and everything else. Darren Waller has he's got a story about sobriety. You guys know my story with sobriety, so it's a nice feel-good story considering all the Antonio Brown crap that we've had to deal with. It's a nice story. And
it really is.
The kid has played fantastic, whether he does that in London against the Chicago. But, Kyle, this Chicago Bears defense is ferocious. I mean, we watched that game. Granted, we know what the Minnesota Vikings are. They're running the football, so they're pretty predictable. But the Bears they're no joke. I love Darren Waller. I'm rooting for him. I get the play, 10 targets. I do like Greg Olsen. Bounce back game, 4K against Jacksonville. We love us a healthy Greg Olsen. So I'm going to get me some Greg Olsen at 4K. We've seen what he can do. Can have 8 receptions, can have 90 yards, can have a touchdown, pay off that salary easily. I'm not going to dig deep or swim deep in the sea of mediocrity this week. So I won't stray too far. As much as I love Austin Hooper, I think he's got a tough matchup. The Texans shut down Greg Olsen, something they do well on defense. So I will stay away from Hooper. Might have a little bit of him in tournaments. I'm not, I think Jimmy Graham can get a bump. Devontae Adams, for some reason, does not play. It's a lackluster crew. We don't know what MVS is right now. Geronimo Allison has disappointed. So I think it's nice to see Jimmy Graham have 8 targets at 4,300 in a game that should have some points in it. I will have myself some Jimmy Graham. I'm interested to see what Mark Andrews. I love the rapport that he's formed with Lamar Jackson. I think he can be had in some tournaments because Mark Andrews is probably finish the season as a top 10 fantasy tight end.
It'd be great if Jimmy Graham caught some of those targets, especially those ones in the end zone. And he may well. I mean, opportunity's king in this game. We all know
That's
that.
Right.
Defenses you're keen on this very week, Justin Lonero.
It's not. I was all over the New England Patriots last week. They won me a fair amount of money on DraftKings. It's not a time to get off them now. I mean, this is a team, gentlemen, where I can tell you that, we're talking about Dalvin Cook carrying the Vikings offense, and this Patriots defense is what's pretty much carrying the Patriots as a whole. I mean, the offensive line's in shambles. Tom Brady threw an interception that Kyle would have thrown the other day inside the 5. It was just mind-boggling. So this is probably the best Patriots defense that I've ever seen. And for even at 4,300, I mean, you could easily get 20, 25 DraftKings points from them. The Redskins are going to be chasing points. We don't like to spend up, but if you fade them and you don't play the Patriots and they get 20, 25 points and you try to be cute and play the Pittsburgh Steelers, who, have a pretty good, they're cheap at home against the Ravens, and you're going to get screwed and you're going to lose money. So I'm going to spend some money this week because of this Patriots team that I'm studying and watching quite a bit of. 4,300, it is expensive, but I want to be safe. It's not a place that I like to gamble. I have a little bit of interest in the Tennessee Titans at home against the Bills, low point total, but it's a Titans team that can do a little bit of everything. They're sacking the quarterback. They have some picks. I like the price at $3K. But yeah, I'm not going to get cute. And again, it's a position where we had the Ravens last week. It was the Ravens and it was the Patriots for me. And I thought the Ravens were in a fantastic spot at home against Cleveland, -1. -1. So, I mean, you had to pay up some extra money for them causing you points. So it's a good thing I had about 90% Patriots, but I can't envision myself getting them off them at this point.
Kyle, can you?
Yeah, no, I think they're probably the highest projected, but I'm still team mostly pay down for defense. My first team that I'm paying down for is the Chargers. They get to play Denver. Denver's bottom 6 in points as an offense, and in the bottom half in yardage produced. So I think the Chargers defense should have no problem, especially the Denver line doesn't look very good. Chargers finally coming into their own, having their best fantasy performance last week. Obviously, it's easy to do that against Miami, but I think Denver is not a hard challenge either. And then if I'm paying all the way down, I actually think that going with the Falcons defense, who does have a nice front seven, that is like their secondary doesn't scare me. Their front seven is actually pretty talented. And of course, when you get to face Deshaun Watson, like you're just guaranteeing yourself like 2+ sacks, and they're so cheap. So I think they're probably the best value play on the slate. Right now they're 2,500. And finally, at the exact same price, I think depending on which way ownership goes, if either of these teams are popular, Cincinnati is the other great defense. Basically the exact same thing. Bad offensive line, high play volume. I don't care if Cincinnati is a good defense or not. You're gonna get sacks on Kyler Murray the same way you will against Deshaun Watson. So if Atlanta is chalky, I'll go Cincinnati and vice versa.
Projecting well, Mr. Dvorchak. They're a top. I'm seeing them as a top 8 projected defense this week. So you're only spending 2,500. The Titans are right there, but the Patriots are at the top. So I would tend to agree there for certain.
Interesting stuff. Always appreciate the inputs of both of you fellows. Let's wrap it up tonight. Just in general, what are the key games for you, Justin, that you're most interested in seeing?
Oh, well, first and foremost, it's going to be the Falcons and the Texans. I think that it's a game that we want to stack. And I'm also interested in the Tampa Bay Bucks and Saints game. I think that's going to be a game that can have a shootout involved in it. So some fantasy goodness with those 4 games there, and the Cowboys and the Green Bay Packers should be a great NFC shootout. I'm really optimistic about the Cowboys making a run this season. And the Packers are. It's interesting under Matt LaFleur. We're seeing Aaron Rodgers kind of adapt at this point in his career. It's like he's transforming into something different, but he's still been Aaron Rodgers. He's still been damn good, and we saw that Thursday night.
Kyle, Chiefs, Colts, how good is it going to be?
Chiefs Colts should be pretty dang good, and especially I was a big Jacoby Brissett doubter. He's well outperformed my expectations, especially last week with no T.Y. Hilton. I was pretty concerned for them, and yeah, they did not play well as a team, but he still ended up putting points. Like fantasy wise, I don't really care if they win or not. I'm not a Colts fan. I just want fantasy points, and and that's what he's doing. So even in terms of just like not as a player but fantasy, I was down on him in this offense. They have proved me wrong, so I will be keen to see how T.Y. Hilton is looking. If not, I believe Paris Campbell exited but came back, so I think he will probably be the guy I go to. And of course, it's always a crapshoot with your Chiefs weapons, but they are bound to find their way in tournaments. Last week it was the running backs. I don't think that stays, given that Patrick Mahomes had players go down to 1. He had plays called back. I think we can expect some positive touchdown regression for a dude who threw 300 yards. I think he's done that every week this season. He's so freaking good. It's unbelievable. It's some of the best football I've ever seen. So, yeah, I'll be going with his weapons again. I think I'll probably be paying down a little more for his weapons, more Demarcus Robinson, McCole Hardman, potentially Darrell Williams. But, yeah, it's going to be great. Other games I'm eyeing up. One player we didn't talk about, Christian Kirk. I'm not sure how optimistic I am that he plays. That puts I'm not thinking he's going to play. We'll know. I think they said they'll have an update tomorrow. I guess it would be today when this podcast comes out on Wednesday. So they will have updated us by Wednesday on his status. I don't think it's going to be good. That puts Keyshawn Johnson or Damiere Byrd firmly in play, both sub 4K guys, I believe. So I think you're going to get a lot of value out of Arizona Cincinnati, not where I'm paying up for. Like Justin said, I think the one of the best games to stack, especially in terms of like high priced players, Atlanta Houston, great game. And beyond that, I think you can get running back value in terms of Christian McCaffrey facing Leonard Fournette. Outside of that, I think that's where most of my exposure is going to come from in a kind of a dull slate with not a ton of value right now.
Right. I'm on board with pretty much everything there, co-signing on all that. I would like to see if the Vikings passing attack is going to get right and they can't do it against the Giants. I don't know what they're going to do it against. So that'll be interesting to watch as well. Justin, wrap us up, please, sir.
Oh, hey, it's good talking to you guys. We're back. It's week 5. I was thinking about it earlier. I'm like, recording with these guys is already week 5. What are we going to talk about tonight? But again, I can be found on Twitter at Justin Lonero. Kyle tweets here on Twitter in Football Diehard on Twitter. I can't believe it's been over 50 shows, Kyle. I mean, it's interesting. We just keep grinding. We keep getting better. And I look forward to talking to you guys every week.
All right. We'll see you next week.